The world is a blurred landscape seen through the condensation-streaked glass of a carriage window. Outside, the scenery is a frantic montage. Jagged mountains of misfortune, vast plains of monotony, and the sudden, jarring detours of tragedy that appear without warning. Within the cabin, the passengers sit in silence. Their posture is one of practiced resignation, shoulders slumped, gazes fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for a sudden change in the weather to alter their destination. They are convinced that the carriage is commanded by an invisible, often indifferent driver, a phantom named fate, or circumstance, or luck. They watch as the road twists into treacherous mountain passes, and they do not reach for the reins. They witness the storm clouds darkening the afternoon, and they do not ask for a change in course. They are governed by the rhythm of the road, rather than the intention of the traveler. But consider the paradox. The leather reins that command the horses are not hanging from a hook on the ceiling, nor are they held by an absent hand. They are resting, slack and waiting, in the laps of those sitting in the back seat. The carriage is not autonomous. It is not even propelled by the horses alone, but by the subtle, continuous pressure of the one who decides where the journey must end. To remain a passenger is to ignore the weight of the leather in your own hands. To wake up is to realize that the phantom driver has never existed. You have been holding the reins while dreaming of a destination you never dared to command. The road is not dictating your life. Your refusal to steer is. The condition of the passenger is not a failure of character. It is a failure of perception, deeply rooted in the psychological architecture of modern existence. To understand why one defaults to the back seat, one must interrogate the nature of the external locus of control. Why does the human psyche so readily abandon its sovereignty? The answer lies in the safety of the ditch. To be a passenger is to be absolved of the burden of failure. If one is merely riding, one cannot be blamed for the accidents on the road. If the carriage crashes into the ravine of poverty or isolation, the passenger can point to the mountain, the weather, or the supposed incompetence of the driver. This is a masterful, if subconscious, defense mechanism. It allows the individual to maintain a fragile, ego-preserving narrative. I am good, but the world is cruel. But how does this manifest in the mechanics of the soul? The mind is a reflexive, recording device. When one observes a life of happenstance, one is essentially feeding the subconscious a continuous stream of data that confirms its own impotence. The brain, a brilliant and tireless servant, observes this data and concludes that the master desires a life of reaction. It begins to scan the environment for evidence of restriction, creating a feedback loop of scarcity and limitation. This is why waiting is the most dangerous posture one can adopt. Waiting is not a neutral state. It is an active state of surrender. By waiting, you are signaling to the deepest layers of your consciousness that the source of your supply, your joy, and your direction lies outside of yourself. To break this loop, one must embrace a more rigorous philosophical stance. The universe is not a series of objective external events, but an extension of internal conviction. The physical world is the delayed shadow of the inner reality. If the shadow is dark, it is not because the sun has failed. It is because the object casting the shadow, the self, has shifted its alignment. The sovereign individual understands that the road is merely a canvas. To treat the road as the master is to be a servant to one's own projections. Therefore, the primary task of the waking soul is to reclaim the I, that central point of awareness, and relocate it from the window to the seat of command. Consider the tale of Elias, a man who lived his entire existence on a ship in the middle of a vast, uncharted ocean. For decades, Elias lived as a passenger in the galley, watching the waves with a mixture of terror and longing. He kept a meticulous journal of the weather, blaming the wind for his lack of progress and the lack of stars for his inability to find a port. He believed the ship was moved by the currents of destiny, and that his only role was to endure the swells. Elias suffered, as all passengers do, from the geography of lack. He believed that the island of prosperity lay somewhere on the horizon, but he was convinced that the ship was steered by unseen hands that possessed a vendetta against his happiness. He would stand at the bow, shouting at the storm, "Why have you brought me here? Why is there no harbor?" One evening, exhausted by his own lamentations, Elias wandered into the pilot's cabin, a room he had avoided for 40 years, believing it was locked. It was not locked. It was merely empty. He saw the great wooden wheel, coated in a layer of dust. He saw the compass, its needle trembling, waiting for a destination to be set. Elias realized that for 40 years, the ship had been circling in the doldrums because he had never once touched the wheel. The ocean was not a prison. It was a medium waiting to be traversed. The wind did not choose the direction. The sails did, and the sails were positioned by the wheel. Elias did not suddenly gain a new ship. The sky did not immediately clear. The ocean remained as turbulent as it had been the day before, but he gripped the mahogany wheel. He felt the cold texture of the wood against his palms, the first tactile sensation of authority he had ever known. He turned it not toward where the wind was blowing, but toward the star he had secretly worshipped in his journals. The ship did not lurch forward instantly. It groaned. It resisted the shift. The creaking of the timber sounded like the protest of a lifetime of stagnation. But as the bow began to cut a new line through the black water, Elias understood the truth that would define his salvation. The captaincy was not a reward for merit. It was an inherent right that had been lying in wait, neglected in the silence of the cabin. To translate this into your own life requires no dramatic exodus. You do not need to burn your life down to begin driving. You need only to change the frequency of your attention. Today, you are asked to perform a simple, quiet, yet revolutionary act. Observe your reactions. Whenever you feel that tightening in your chest, the frustration at a delayed flight, the anxiety over a dwindling bank balance, the resentment of a friend's casual remark, stop. Do not attempt to fix the world. Fix your position. In that moment of irritation, you are the passenger. You are letting the stimulus drive the carriage. Instead, acknowledge the impulse. Say to yourself, I am currently reacting as a passenger. That single act of naming the state of being is the moment you step out of the back seat. You have shifted from being the effect of the road to the cause of your experience. As you move through the next hours, keep your hands on the figurative wheel of your focus. When the path becomes steep, do not look at the incline. Look at the goal. When the carriage rattles, do not lament the frame. Command the direction. You are beginning to understand that your identity is not a product of your biography. It is a product of your choice. But while we have established the why of this reclamation, we have yet to explore the how, the specific linguistic technology required to turn the wheel with precision. How does one convert a vague desire into a command that the universe cannot ignore? How do we stop the subconscious from interpreting our deepest hopes as mere wishes? We are nearing the summit. The air is thinning, and the view is becoming clear. In the next chapter, we will dissect the very physics of the I. Choose the declaration that shifts the gears of the universe. Stay with me, for we are about to leave the road of the past behind. If this opening has resonated with the truth that has been waiting in your own heart, consider subscribing to this journey of sovereignty. The engine of your life is warming up. It is time to shift from the gear of resignation to the gear of command. The transition to the second chapter is where the true technology of manifestation begins. Imagine a sprawling, opulent ballroom, illuminated by 1,000 flickering chandeliers. The air is heavy with the scent of jasmine and old parchment. Hundreds of guests dance in a synchronized, frantic rhythm, moving to a melody they cannot hear. Some move with aggressive strides, clutching at the empty air. Others sway in circles, their eyes glassy and vacant. In the center of this room stands a massive, ornate, clockwork mechanism, a master console of levers, gears, and golden dials. This is the engine of reality. Every guest in the ballroom believes they are being pushed by the tide of the music, shoved by the momentum of the crowd, or tripped by the unevenness of the marble floor. They curse the architect of the ballroom for the heat, for the discord, for the exhaustion. Yet, every single one of them is standing within reach of the master console. The levers are warm to the touch, vibrating with potential, waiting for a hand to grasp them. Most guests treat the console as a piece of art, a statue to be admired from a distance. While they continue to dance their forced, involuntary steps, they perceive the world as a rigid, unyielding theater of events, unaware that the floor itself is composed of their own unspoken preferences. The paradox is stark. The individual feels suffocated by a reality they did not choose, while standing in the very place where that reality is being woven. To reach out and pull a lever is to shatter the illusion of the ballroom's tyranny. To grasp the dial is to become the architect, yet most choose to remain in the dance, mistaking their participation for powerlessness. To move from the ballroom dance to the master console, one must deconstruct the mechanics of choice itself. Why, psychologically, is the human mind so resistant to the idea of total accountability? It begins with the confusion between preference and choice. A preference is a passive desire, a wish for the weather to be fair or for the traffic to dissolve. A choice, however, is a fundamental act of alignment. Most individuals spend their lives in a state of reactive preference. They observe the world, find it lacking, and express a desire for it to be different. Why does this fail to manifest? Because the subconscious mind is not a genie that grants wishes. It is an architect that executes blueprints. When one says, "I want to be successful," the subconscious interprets the word want as a declaration of lack. It hears, "I do not have success." Therefore, it builds a reality consistent with that premise, a state of perpetual pursuit, where success is always the carrot dangling inches ahead. This is the trap of the knot. How does the mind bypass this trap? By understanding the law of focus. The mind operates on a principle of literal command. It does not differentiate between an external observation, "the economy is failing," and an internal decree, "I am experiencing failure." To the mind, there is no out there. Every complaint, every why me, every judgmental glance at a bank statement is a line of code written into the subconscious operating system. The subconscious is the most faithful, uncritical servant in the universe. It has no power of discrimination. It does not ask, "Do you really mean that?" or "Are you just venting?" It simply processes the input. If the input is, "I am tired of this struggle," the subconscious says, "Order received. Create more struggle." The recursion here is infinite. You observe the struggle. Is greater than. You report the struggle. Is greater than. The subconscious recreates the struggle. Is greater than. You observe the struggle. Breaking this cycle requires a radical shift in perspective. You must stop treating your life as a record of history and start treating it as a laboratory of future intent. The choice is not a decision to change the world. It is a decision to change the point of observation. When you decide to choose, you are essentially silencing the voice of the passenger and asserting the authority of the driver. You are claiming that your internal alignment is the primary reality, and the external world is merely the echo. In the mountain village of Oakhaven, there lived a master clockmaker named Julian, who was renowned not for his precision, but for his uncanny ability to repair the unfixable. Clients would bring him watches that had been crushed, rusted, or dropped into the freezing currents of the Alpine rivers. One day, a young apprentice named Alara, who was struggling with a profound sense of helplessness, asked him, "Master, why do you not grow frustrated when you open a shattered watch? Why do you not curse the owner for their carelessness?" Julian set down his loop and smiled. "Alara, if I look at the broken pieces and say, 'This is a disaster,' the watch remains a disaster. My mind becomes cluttered with the wreckage. But if I look at the pieces and say, 'This is a puzzle waiting for its original design to be restored,' the wreckage disappears. I do not see the broken glass. I see the potential for the function." Alara tried this. She spent months working on a clock that had been trapped in a fire. She felt the urge to complain about the soot, the heat, and the damage. But every time she felt that rise of resentment, she whispered, "I choose to see the design, not the damage." One afternoon, she found herself struggling with a complex gear assembly. She felt the old, familiar panic, the feeling that she was behind, that she wasn't good enough, that the watch would never tick. She paused. She stepped away from the workbench. She realized that her panic was an order to the universe to provide more things to be panicked about. She breathed. She looked at the gears not as obstacles, but as the medium of her success. Within minutes, she saw the misalignment that had eluded her for weeks. It was not a matter of skill, but a matter of perception. The watch ticked into motion. Alara realized then that the watch was not the problem. The story she told herself about the watch was the problem. When she changed the order she gave to her mind, the material world obeyed. She had mastered the lever. She had shifted the dial. She was no longer the apprentice of chaos, but the sovereign of her craft. To embody this truth today, you must implement the pause of the sovereign. Whenever you feel the urge to label your circumstances as bad, unfair, or limited, you must treat that thought as a fire alarm. Pause. Do not suppress the feeling, but do not feed it with words. In that gap, that sacred, empty space between the event and your reaction, you have the power to plant a new seed. Instead of saying, "This is hard," say, "This is an opportunity for me to demonstrate my power." Instead of saying, "I have no choice," say, "I am choosing to see a way through." This is not a polite suggestion. It is the fundamental law of your existence. You are literally coding your future with every emotional pivot. Before we move forward, consider this. If your current reality is the perfect manifestation of your past subconscious choices, then imagine what is possible when you start making your choices consciously. The ballroom is about to get much quieter, and the music is about to become entirely yours. If you are finding that these insights are clearing the fog from your own path, take a moment to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. We are building a community of those who have decided to stop dancing to the music of the past and start conducting the symphony of their own destiny. But even the most precise navigator can stumble if they do not know the difference between levels of power. We have discussed the architecture of the ballroom and the levers of the console, but there are 3 distinct levels at which you can operate this machinery. Most people spend their lives vibrating at the lowest level, unaware that the higher frequencies of power even exist. In our next chapter, we will strip away the illusions of level 1 and level 2, and finally, ascend to the sovereign level 3. The horizon is shifting. Are you ready to see what lies beyond the ballroom doors? The city at night is a tapestry of lights, each flicker representing a soul in a state of suspended animation. From the heights of a silent, glass-walled observatory, one can see the gridlock below. There are the headlights of the masses, moving in rigid, serpentine lines, trapped by the geometry of the concrete. Then, there are the few, the solitary figures walking against the grain, their movements fluid, unbothered by the stop-and-go pulses of the traffic lights. The paradox is this. The people in the gridlock believe they are going somewhere, yet they are essentially stationary, paralyzed by the same red lights and detours as everyone else. The ones walking are not ignoring the city. They are simply operating on a frequency where the city's obstacles have lost their weight. How can two people inhabit the same physical space, governed by the same laws of gravity and time, yet experience realities so fundamentally different? The answer lies not in their wealth, nor their intelligence, nor their pedigree. It lies in the level of choice at which they vibrate. The majority of humanity remains asleep at the wheel, mistaking the reflection of the road for the road itself. They are the mirror, not the sun. They believe they are the ones acting, when in truth, they are merely reacting to a world that has already dictated their response. To step out of the gridlock, one must first recognize the architecture of the three levels of consciousness: the reactive, the intentional, and the sovereign. To understand the mechanics of these levels, one must engage in a recursive examination of the self. Why do we default to the lower levels, and how does one ascend? Level 1, the reactive mirror. At this level, the individual is a passive surface. When the world presents a thorn, the individual feels a prick. When the world offers a flower, the individual feels a scent. The psyche here is entirely permeable. The fundamental flaw is the belief that the outer determines the inner. The why is a fear of vulnerability. It feels safer to be a victim of circumstance because victims are not responsible for their outcomes. The how of this level is simple. Wait for the world to move, then mirror the motion. If the world is angry, the individual becomes angry. It is a state of perpetual oscillation, where the soul is tossed like a leaf on an autumn wind. Level 2, the intentional architect. Here, the individual begins to realize the mirror is flawed. They understand that the reaction is not mandatory. They begin to create a gap of space between the stimulus and the response. In this gap, they exercise the power of intention. They say, I recognize that I am feeling fear, but I choose to be courageous. This is a significant ascent, yet it remains laborious. The individual is still struggling against the tide. They are using their willpower to push back against the weight of the world. It is the life of a craftsman, productive, noble, but exhausting. Level 3, the sovereign master. This is the summit. The master does not react to the world, nor do they fight against it. The master understands that the outer is not a separate entity to be managed. It is a manifestation of the inner command. The master does not choose against the storm. They choose the existence of the calm. Why is this so difficult to grasp? Because we are conditioned to believe in a temporal delay that we must wait for the result before we can accept the truth. The sovereign bypasses this, knowing that the physical world is merely a delayed shadow of the spiritual world. The how is the total alignment of will and being. If one chooses peace while the storm howls, the storm must eventually lose its power. For its root cause, the internal chaos has been severed. The sovereign knows that they are not the sailor in the storm, but the mind that conceived the storm to test its own mastery. There was once a kingdom plagued by a drought so severe that the wells had turned to dust and the crops had withered into ghosts. In the heart of this parched land lived an elder named Theron, who tended a small, lush garden that defied the desolation. While the rest of the kingdom prayed to the gods of rain and cursed the sun, Theron walked through his garden with a gentle, steady pace. His neighbors approached him in desperation. Theron, they cried, how do you survive? The heavens are closed, the earth is dead, and the wind is a furnace. Do you not fear for your life? Do you not curse the drought as we do? Theron gestured to the green vines of his garden. You look at the earth and see a drought. You look at the sun and see an enemy. You are reacting to the drought, and so the drought is your master. I do not look at the earth. I look at the seed. I have chosen to live in a reality where the water has already arrived, and my consciousness is the well that holds it. A young skeptic, a man named Kyle, who lived in the agony of level 1, sneered. But the plants are not real. They are a hallucination of your mind. The reality is the dust. Theron smiled, plucked a ripe fruit from a branch, and handed it to the young man. The fruit is physical, kale. The water is real. But the permission for it to grow did not come from the clouds. It came from my refusal to accept the drought as the final word. You are living in the reality of your complaint. I am living in the reality of my choice. Years later, Kale returned, his own life having been ravaged by the drought. He asked Theron, "Teach me to be a master. I am tired of the dust." Theron led him to a mountain stream. The first level is to scream at the sky. The second level is to dig a ditch and hope for rain. The third level is to realize that the mountain is the water. You do not wait for the stream to appear. You align your spirit with the source of the stream, and the stream follows your footsteps. Kale did not understand immediately. He spent days trying to think the water into existence, straining his mind until he was exhausted. This was the trap of the second level. But eventually, he stopped straining. He stopped looking at the dust. He began to walk with the quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who already carried the rain in his heart. And as he walked, the path ahead of him began to dampen, the grass began to stir, and the desert of his old life began to retreat. He had moved from the victim of the drought to the sovereign of his own harvest. To embody this level of sovereignty, you must master the 3-breath reset. This is your tool for instant transit from the gridlock of the crowd to the open road of the sovereign. When you find yourself in the grip of a reactive emotion, that familiar, suffocating panic, pause. Breath 1. Inhale the reality of the present. As you exhale, release the attachment to the problem. Feel the physical tension leave your frame. You are not the problem. You are the observer. Breath 2. Inhale the space. As you exhale, clear the internal room. Remove the stories, the past judgments, and the what-ifs. You are creating a void. Nature abhors a vacuum, and a divine choice is waiting to rush in. Breath 3. Inhale the light of your own sovereignty. As you exhale, speak your command. I choose peace, or I choose abundance, or I choose clarity. Do not ask. Command. Practice this until it becomes your natural state. Do not wait for the storm to subside. Become the silence that renders the storm irrelevant. This is not mere mindfulness. It is the strategic management of your own spiritual frequency. But be warned, the road to mastery is fraught with invisible pitfalls. Even those who successfully enter the third level of sovereignty often stumble because they misunderstand the law of the spoken word. There are specific, subtle mistakes, traps of language and intention that can collapse your reality just as you are building it. You have learned how to drive, but do you know how to avoid the cliffs that appear when your words are misaligned? The journey into the mechanics of your own power is becoming increasingly precise. We have established your identity and your station. Now, we must sharpen the wand of your speech. In our next chapter, we will uncover why the universe is literally allergic to the word not, and how your tongue can either build your kingdom or turn it to ash. The path forward is illuminated, but are you speaking the language of creation or the language of the void? Subscribe and prepare for the alchemy of the word. Imagine a cavernous workshop, not of wood or steel, but of living light. In this space, every word ever uttered by a human soul hangs in the air, glowing with varying degrees of brilliance. Some are faint, flickering like dying embers. Others are sharp, jagged shards of obsidian. Still others are radiant, pulsing orbs of pure gold. In the center of this chamber stands a great loom. The weaver is not a person, but the universe itself, endlessly pulling at these threads to stitch together the fabric of tomorrow. The paradox of the human experience is that most individuals believe their words are merely tools for communication. Simple, ephemeral puffs of breath used to describe a world that is already fixed. They do not realize that their tongue is a shuttle and their sentences are the thread. When a person sighs, "I will never get out of this debt," they are not describing a financial reality. They are handing a heavy, leaden thread to the loom. They are demanding that the tapestry of their future be woven with the dark fibers of scarcity. Observe the irony. The master of the house complains of the cold, yet they are the ones stoking the fire with ice. They watch the fabric of their life fray at the edges, never realizing that the loose thread is clutched firmly in their own teeth. The words you speak are not merely reflections of your current state. They are the active blueprints for the state that is yet to be. You are the architect of your own atmosphere, and every sentence is a command to the ether. To master the alchemy of the spoken word, one must confront the fundamental truth. The subconscious mind is a literalist, a blind architect, and a servant of absolute obedience. It lacks the capacity for irony, sarcasm, or complex negations. Why is this so? The subconscious evolved as a survival mechanism designed to act instantly upon the commands it receives without the delay of logical deduction. If a tiger is sensed, it does not analyze the philosophical implications of threat. It simply triggers the flight response. This is its genius and its danger. How does the subconscious process language? It operates on the principle of focus anchoring. When you say, "I choose not to be lonely," your subconscious does not perceive the not. It perceives lonely. It zooms in on the image of the solitary figure. It anchors itself to the frequency of isolation, and it begins to scan the environment for evidence of that state. The why behind this is that the subconscious mind is binary. It cannot hold a vacuum. It must fill the space you provide. If you tell it what you do not want, you have still provided the image of what you do not want. You have instructed the architect to build a house of isolation, even if your intention was to protest it. This leads us to the recursive necessity of forward-facing blueprinting. The mind cannot manifest a negation. You cannot not be something. You can only become something else. The shift requires moving from the defensive, fighting against, to the generative, creating toward. If you look at a shadow and command it to disappear, you will fail. You must turn the light and command the illumination. How does one achieve this? By shifting the syntax of the soul. You must stop defining your life by what you are shedding and start defining it by what you are assuming. The subconscious does not record your intentions. It records your focus. If your focus is anchored in the not, you are vibrating at the frequency of the thing you fear. To align with the infinite is to speak as the infinite speaks, in declarations of presence and possession. You are not waiting for the reality to arrive. You are stating the reality that is already anchored in the spiritual realm so that it may be pulled into the physical. Consider the story of Julian, a master bridge builder in an age where rivers were considered impassable boundaries. Julian was tasked with spanning the great chasm, a gorge so deep that those who looked into it often lost their sense of balance. For years, his peers tried to bridge the gap by focusing on the danger. They spent their days shouting, "Don't fall! Don't let the beams slip! Don't allow the wind to topple the supports!" Their blueprints were filled with warnings of collapse. Their words were dominated by the fear of what they did not want. Every bridge they constructed crumbled, for their energy was spent obsessing over the abyss. They were architects of the don't, and the chasm claimed every attempt. Julian approached the work differently. He stood at the edge of the abyss, but he did not speak of falling. He did not speak of the depth. He looked across to the other side and visualized the stone arch standing firm, beautiful and enduring. He wrote his blueprints in the affirmative. He told his workers, "Place the beam so that the arch holds the weight of the sun. Build for the stability of the foundation. Construct for the strength of the union." When a beam wobbled, he did not cry, "Don't let it fall," he commanded. "Align the beam for perfect equilibrium." Julian's bridge did not just survive, it became a marvel of the age. He succeeded because he refused to give the not any space in his lexicon. He understood that the chasm was merely a space waiting to be filled, and he filled it with the substance of his certainty. He did not build away from the abyss, he built toward the connection. He proved that the tongue is a tool of creation, and when wielded with the precision of the affirmative, it can conquer even the deepest of divides. To embody this truth today, you must implement the positive blueprint protocol. For the next 24 hours, perform a vigil over your own speech. Observe the automatic phrases that slip from your lips. I don't want to be late. I hope I don't fail. It's not that hard. Each of these is a command to the universe to bring you the things you wish to avoid. Stop mid-sentence. Correct the trajectory. Transform the don't into a do. Replace I don't want to be late with I am, choosing to arrive in perfect timing. Replace I hope I don't fail with I am, choosing to walk in the flow of success. Do not merely say the words, feel the shift in your posture as you speak them. You are no longer defending against the negative. You are occupying the space of the positive. The subconscious will record these new blueprints with a sense of relief. It prefers the clarity of the affirmative. By providing it with a positive structure, you are granting it permission to stop defending and start building. But even with the right blueprints, there is a subtle danger that can undermine your entire structure. It is the silent thief of manifestation, the act of choosing with your lips, but sabotaging with your doubt 5 minutes later. Florence Scovel Shinn often warned of the double-minded soul, the person who plants seeds and then digs them up to see if they are growing. We have learned to speak the language of the master, but are you prepared to hold the frequency when the world offers only silence in return? In our next chapter, we will delve into the danger of the double-minded state and the secret to maintaining the state of your choice when reality seems to lag behind your command. The bridge is under construction, and your words are the stone. Keep building, subscribe, and prepare to guard your harvest from the winter of second-guessing. The next chapter will reveal how to sustain the frequency of a master, even in the heart of the weight. Deep within the silent, velvet-draped halls of the grand conservatory of manifestation, there sits a master gardener. He is tasked with planting the seeds of infinite provision in a plot of fertile, silver-dusted soil. The sunlight is perfect. The atmosphere is charged with the hum of cosmic potential. He plants a seed with a flourish of authority, declaring, "This shall be a forest of abundance." But wait, scarcely an hour passes before he returns, his brow furrowed in frantic doubt. He drops to his knees, digs his calloused fingers into the delicate earth, and pulls the seed from its bed. "Is it growing?" he demands, his voice trembling. "Why do I not see the roots yet?" He stares at the seed, blames the soil for its slowness, and then jams it back into the ground with a grunt of impatience. This is the portrait of the double-minded soul. It is the most common affliction of the spiritual traveler. The act of setting a grand intention with the lips, only to rescind it with the heart moments later. One stands in the doorway of a new reality, only to look back at the room of the past, their feet straddling two different worlds. The paradox is haunting. The individual possesses the wand of their word, yet they use it to draw a circle of light, and then immediately erase it with their own footsteps. It is a dance of constant cancellation, where the miracle is aborted in the womb of the imagination, because the architect lacks the patience to let the foundation set. To resolve the state of double-mindedness, one must subject the internal process of commitment to a rigorous philosophical autopsy. Why does the soul, which so fervently desires a new reality, recoil the moment it must inhabit that reality? The why is found in the comfort of the familiar. The human ego is a creature of historical evidence. It feels secure only when it can verify its current state against the record of its past. When you declare, "I am a person of abundance," the ego experiences a momentary panic. It looks at the empty bank account, the silence of the phone, and the stagnant circumstances, and it screams, "This is a lie. You are a fraud." The double-mindedness occurs because the individual allows the ego to override the spirit. The how of this self-sabotage is a process of evidence-based betrayal. The moment the external world fails to provide immediate, material proof of the new declaration, the individual loses faith. They begin to speak in the language of lack again. I guess it isn't working, or things are just so tight right now. Recursive thinking reveals that this oscillation is a form of spiritual cancellation. Every time you return to the old narrative, you are sending a new, contradictory order to the subconscious. You are essentially telling the architect, ignore the first order. Return to the blueprints of struggle. The subconscious, being a faithful servant, simply complies. It halts the construction of the forest and begins dismantling the sapling you just planted. To overcome this, one must understand that faith is not a feeling. It is an unwavering allegiance to a truth that has not yet materialized. It is the ability to maintain the internal frequency of the already done, regardless of the not yet seen. The sovereign does not check the soil every hour. The sovereign knows that once the word is spoken, the law of the universe is already moving. The delay between the word and the manifestation is not a sign of failure. It is the time required for the physical density of the world to catch up to the speed of the spirit. There was once a veteran fisherman named Silas, who was famous for returning to port with a full hull while others came back with empty nets. Silas did not use the largest nets, nor did he travel to the furthest waters. He possessed a peculiar discipline. Once he cast his line, he never once looked at the water. Other fishermen would sit in their boats, staring into the dark depths, their faces twisted with anxiety. They would pull their lines up every few minutes, swearing at the silence, convinced that the fish had abandoned them. They would reel in, cast out, reel in, cast out, their constant movement churning the water and scaring away the very abundance they sought. Silas, however, would cast his line, secure the rod in the holder, and then sit back, closing his eyes. He would listen to the ocean, breathe the salt air, and smile as if his hull were already overflowing. When his rivals mocked him, saying, "Silas, you are not even watching your bait. How will you know if you have a catch?" Silas would simply reply, "The sea knows its business. My business is to hold the rod. The fish do not come because I stare at them. They come because I have cast my line in the place where they thrive." One day, the storm of the century struck. The other fishermen panicked, reeling in their lines in fear, abandoning their posts to rush back to the safety of the harbor. Silas remained. He stood in the center of the gale, his hand steady on the rod, his mind focused on the catch he had already claimed. He did not look at the waves that threatened to capsize him. He kept his eyes on the inner vision of the full hull. When the storm passed, the other boats were empty, their owners exhausted from the frantic struggle of doubt. Silas, however, felt a weight on his line that nearly broke the wood. He pulled, and up from the depths came a catch of such magnitude that it required 3 men to lift. He had not caught the fish by force. He had caught them by his refusal to let go of the line, even when the surface of the world was raging. He had proven that the catch is always waiting for the one who has the patience to stay in the state of expectation. To embody this truth today, you must master the state of commitment. When you make a declaration, whether it be for health, prosperity, or peace, you must treat it as a sacred, immutable contract. Practice the art of quiet expectation. After you have spoken your command, move through your day as if the manifestation is already an objective fact. If you have chosen abundance, do not walk through your day checking your pockets for lack. Walk with the gait of a person who is already provided for. If a negative circumstance arises, do not re-choose the lack by complaining about it. Observe it. Acknowledge that it is a remnant of an old choice, and dismiss it with the calm confidence of one who knows the new order is already being processed. Stop the checkup. The urge to verify your success is the strongest symptom of doubt. Every Every time you find yourself wondering, is it working? Remind yourself, the law is precise. The word is spoken. The harvest is guaranteed. If these lessons on maintaining your sovereign frequency are stripping away the illusions of the past, I invite you to leave a like on this narrative. It serves as a digital seal upon your intention, a public declaration that you are no longer the one who digs up their own seeds, but the one who waits for the miracle with unwavering resolve. But be warned, commitment is only half of the equation. A sovereign who declares with conviction, but sits in paralysis, is like a ship with a brilliant compass, but no rudder. You have the word, and you have the faith, but do you have the courage to recognize the impulse of the manifestation? Many souls mistake the universe's instructions for mere coincidences and miss the chance to build their dream in the physical realm. The next chapter will explore the action of the sovereign, how to move with the current of your choices so that you arrive at your destination with grace and speed. The tide is turning. Are you ready to sail? In the heart of an ancient, snow-dusted forest, there stands a grand, ornate door carved from living cedar. It is a door that leads to the summit of the world, the place where the view is infinite and the air is pure. Thousands of travelers stand before this door, their eyes closed, whispering their deepest desires into the wood. They believe that if they whisper long enough, if they speak with enough conviction, the door will swing wide and deposit them at the peak. They are masters of the spoken word. They have perfected their affirmations. They have learned the art of silence and the rhythm of the breath. Yet, they remain shivering in the cold, their feet rooted to the frozen earth, watching the door remain steadfastly shut. The paradox is this: the door is not locked. It is not even latched. It is a door of intention, and it waits for only one thing: the pressure of a human hand against its grain. The travelers are so enamored with the preparation of their desire that they have forgotten the execution of their destiny. They treat their life as a waiting room rather than a workshop. They have mistaken the blueprint for the building. They stand in the chilling wind, convinced that their choice is a passive state, unaware that the universe is a physical medium that demands a physical response to the spiritual command. To choose is to set the compass. To act is to sail the ship. Without the sail's motion, the compass is merely a decoration. To bridge the gap between I choose and I have, one must confront the treacherous divide of inertia. Why does the soul, once ignited by the fire of a new decree, so often retreat into the sanctuary of inaction? The why is rooted in the fear of the manifestation of the mundane. We often believe that a spiritual truth should manifest through a lightning bolt of cosmic intervention, a sudden windfall, a miraculous disappearance of obstacles, a grand, theatrical transformation. We fear that if we take a mundane step, making a phone call, updating a resume, or forgiving a grudge, we are somehow forcing the process or signaling a lack of faith. We believe that if the universe is truly working, it should do all the heavy lifting. This is a profound error. The how of manifestation is not through the suspension of the laws of nature, but through the perfect alignment with them. Recursive thinking forces us to ask, if the universe is the reflection of the internal state, and you have chosen a new internal state, how could the outer world not shift? It shifts by providing leads, subtle, intuitive nudges that appear in the fabric of your daily life. A conversation you overhear, a book that falls off a shelf, an unexpected urge to walk down a different street. These are not coincidences. They are the tactical feedback of the universe responding to your command. The danger of inaction is that it creates a stagnation of the conduit. If you declare a new direction but refuse to follow the impulse to move, you are essentially closing the valve of your own supply. You are signaling to the subconscious that your command was merely a fantasy, not a direction. Action is the physical testimony of your belief. It is the signature on the contract. When you move, you are not making it happen. You are demonstrating that you believe it is happening. You are participating in the dance, and in doing so, You give the universe the permission it requires to move the mountains. The action itself is the catalyst that allows the unseen to become the seen. Consider the story of Elena, a woman who lived for a decade in a city of gray stone, working in a vault of numbers and ledgers. She was, by all accounts, a prisoner of her own routine, yet she possessed a secret, a burning, unvoiced desire to design gardens that would heal the spirits of the weary. For years, Elena practiced the art of the choice. She spoke her affirmations in the morning light. She aligned her heart with her purpose. But she remained in the vault. She waited for a sign, a sudden promotion, a lottery win, a benefactor to sweep her away. When nothing changed, she grew bitter, believing the law of choice was a fable. One afternoon, she felt an inexplicable, piercing urge to visit a public park she had ignored for years. It was a mundane impulse, utterly devoid of the grandeur she expected from a miracle. She almost dismissed it, thinking, "How will a walk in the park help me become a designer?" But she chose to act. She went to the park. While sitting there, she noticed a discarded sketchbook left on a bench, a relic of someone else's art. She opened it, and in that moment, she found a contact for a local architectural collective. She didn't force the outcome. She simply took the lead. She sent an email. She met a contact. She took a class. Each action was small, seemingly trivial, and required no heroic effort. But as she moved, the vault began to dissolve. The doors she had spent years staring at began to open. Within 6 months, she was not just designing gardens, she was restoring the very soul of the city she had once found so oppressive. Elena realized that her miracle was not the architectural firm. Her miracle was her own willingness to follow the breadcrumbs of her intuition. She had been the lock, and her action was the key. She had finally learned that the universe does not bring the destination to your doorstep. It guides your feet to the place where the destination is waiting. To embody this truth today, you must master the art of the follow-through. Your mandate is to stop waiting for the thunderclap and start listening for the whisper. For the next week, commit to the first impulse rule. When you receive a quiet, persistent nudging to do something, an email to send, a person to call, a project to start, a habit to break, do not pause to analyze its logical utility. Do not ask, "How will this solve my whole life?" Just move. The action is the lubricant that allows the gears of your manifestation to turn. If your choice is radiant health, the action is not just to visualize it. It is to treat your body with the respect that a vessel of health demands. If your choice is abundance, the action is not just to affirm it. It is to organize your space, manage your resources with care, and present yourself as someone who values the supply they are receiving. Action is the language of respect you speak to your own soul. If you feel the pulse of this truth, the realization that your feet are as much a part of your manifestation as your mind, then I invite you to subscribe. We are moving from the realm of the whisper to the realm of the movement. Your support of this channel is your own act of moving toward a small, powerful step in the direction of the sovereign life we are building together. But action, while necessary, must be tempered by the stillness of presence. Even as you move, you must remain in the eye of the hurricane. The world will try to distract you with its noise, its contradictions, and its demands for you to revert to the old passenger. There is a specific, profound discipline required to walk through the fire of the world while keeping your spirit as cool and detached as a mountain lake. In our next chapter, we will explore the sovereignty of presence, the art of maintaining your internal command, even when the external world is screaming for your attention. The destination is in sight, but the path requires a steady hand and a centered heart. See you in the stillness. Imagine, if you will, the eye of a great cyclone. The horizon is a churning wall of slate-gray clouds, torn by lightning and whipped by winds that howl with the fury of 1,000 scorned storms. Debris, the wreckage of broken homes, tangled trees, and the remnants of a shattered landscape whirls in the periphery, a chaotic ballet of destruction. Yet, in the absolute center, there is a sanctuary of profound, terrifying stillness. The sun shines with a golden, indifferent brilliance through the aperture of the storm. Within this circle, the air is not merely calm, it is heavy with the weight of absolute authority. This is the state of the sovereign. Outside the circle, the world screams for your attention. It demands your panic. It begs for your identification with its turmoil. It insists that because the storm is loud, the storm must be the only truth. The paradox is that the majority of humanity lives their entire existence in the chaotic perimeter, battered by the wind and blinded by the debris. They believe the storm is the master, and they are merely the victims of the gale. They do not realize that the eye of the storm is not a place you travel to. It is a posture you assume. To step into the center is to realize that the storm has no power to touch the core of your being unless you step out of the silence and offer it your consent. The world is always howling, but the sovereign is always listening to a different frequency. The discipline of sovereignty of presence is the ultimate test of the awakened soul. It is the practice of maintaining one's internal state despite the contradictory evidence of the external realm. Why is this so profoundly difficult? It is because the human psyche is biologically wired for survival through environmental scanning. We are programmed to prioritize the danger in the periphery over the truth in the center. The why of our distraction is a primitive instinct, a ghost of an ancient time when a rustle in the grass actually meant a predator. Today, the predator is a late payment, a sharp word from a superior, or the cold silence of a loved one. The psyche reacts to these modern triggers with the same ancient urgency, demanding that we surrender our inner peace to address the external crisis. How, then, does the sovereign transcend this? By adopting a recursive loop of observational detachment. When the world presents a trigger, the sovereign does not suppress the emotion, nor do they indulge it. They perform a triangulation. First, they acknowledge the trigger. I see this event. Second, they recognize the stimulus. I feel the reaction rising in my body. Third, they assert the identity. I am the one who is observing the reaction. This detachment is not apathy. It is the highest form of engagement. By refusing to become the event, you prevent the event from becoming your reality. The why behind this is that the physical world is, as previously established, a trailing shadow. If you react to the shadow, you are only reinforcing its darkness. But if you hold your ground in the light of your chosen presence, the shadow must, by the laws of spiritual physics, transform to match your stance. You are not ignoring the storm. You are starving it of the fuel it needs to persist, which is your fear, your validation, and your reaction. You become a non-conductor of negativity. When the storm hits you, it finds no purchase, for there is nothing in you that believes in the reality of its power. Off the rugged, unforgiving coast of the Northern Isles, there stood a lighthouse known as the Sentinel's Eye. For a century, the keepers of this light were tasked with a duty that required an impossible constitution. They were to keep the beacon burning during the most violent maritime tempests in history. One keeper, an elder named during the great gale of 1888, when the waves were said to reach the height of the lighthouse balcony and the sound of the wind shattered windows, Malachi was found sitting in the heart of the lantern room, reading a book of poetry. His assistants were huddled in the basement, weeping in prayer, convinced that the end had come. The lighthouse groaned, the very foundation vibrated with the force of the sea. Malachi did not tremble. He knew that if he allowed the terror of the sea to enter his mind, his hand would shake, and the light would dim. He understood that his primary duty was not to fight the waves, that was a fool's errand, but to maintain the absolute, unwavering steadiness of his own spirit. He sat in the center of the roar, anchored in the truth that the light was eternal. He refused to look out the window at the chaos. He kept his attention on the mechanism of the lamp, polishing the brass, tending the wick, ensuring the beam remained a constant, golden sword in the blackness. When the storm subsided the next morning, the coast was devastated. Ships had been dashed to pieces on the rocks. Yet, the lighthouse stood, and the light had never flickered. Malachi emerged, his clothes dry, his face serene. He had not stopped the storm, but he had mastered it. He had remained the eye, and because he had refused to identify with the gale had been forced to move around him. He showed that presence is not the absence of a storm. It is the presence of an authority that is greater than the storm. To embody this truth today, you must cultivate the inner citadel. This is the practice of maintaining your focus, regardless of the turbulence surrounding you. The next time you are placed in a situation that demands your fear or your anger, a tense meeting, a volatile conversation, or a moment of deep personal uncertainty, bring your attention to the physical center of your being. Breathe. Imagine a sphere of golden light surrounding you, a perimeter that no external energy can cross. Ask yourself, if I were not afraid, what would I do? This single question acts as a surgical strike on the anxiety of the ego. It immediately reorients you from the reaction of the passenger to the presence of the sovereign. Do not attempt to control the outcome. Control the frequency. When the external world shouts, you respond with a steady, unbreakable silence. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to defend your stance. You simply be. Your presence is your power. When you stop vibrating at the frequency of the crisis loses its ability to anchor itself to your life. It will pass through you, and you will remain. If you are beginning to feel the weight of this stillness, the realization that you have the power to stay calm while the world rages, then join us in this movement by subscribing. We are creating a frequency of peace that is stronger than any storm. Your commitment to this path is the anchor that holds the light steady. But there is a final, vital boundary we must discuss. We have learned to rule our own inner kingdoms, but we often stumble at the borders where our life meets the lives of others. The most common trap for the sovereign is the temptation to turn their power into a weapon of control over those they love. We believe that because we have found the light, we must force others to see it too. This is the surest way to lose your sovereignty. In our next chapter, we will uncover the secret to holding your power without infringing on the agency of others, and how to become a reflector of the divine rather than a dictator of circumstances. The horizon is shifting, and the next step is the most delicate of all. Stay centered. The journey is nearing its climax. In the high, alpine meadows of a distant province, there exists a unique botanical phenomenon, the circle of sovereignty. Within a perfectly defined radius, the wildflowers bloom with unmatched vibrancy, a riot of cerulean, gold, and crimson that seems to drink the very sunlight. Outside this perimeter, the terrain is dry, sparse, and brittle. A novice traveler might look at this and conclude that the flowers are selfish, hoarding the water and nutrients for their own gain. They might attempt to dig trenches to divert the water, or transplant the soil, desperate to force the outside to bloom like the inside. But the paradox is hidden in the roots. The flowers do not hoard, they radiate. They bloom with such intensity that they define the boundary of their own ecosystem. They do not reach out to pull the dry earth into their circle. They simply occupy their own space with such absolute presence that the wind carries their seeds to the barren ground, allowing the valley to bloom on its own terms. Many souls walk through life like that novice traveler. They perceive the problems of those around them, a partner's stagnation, a child's worry, a friend's cynical worldview, and they treat these others as annexes of their own kingdom. They try to fix the terrain, to turn the wheel for their neighbors, to force the growth they wish to see. They believe that if they can just control the choices of those they love, their own kingdom will finally be peaceful. They are, in fact, creating a border war within their own soul, exhausted by the attempt to be the dictator of a world that is not their own. They have forgotten that true sovereignty is the most infectious force in existence, precisely because it is the least coercive. To master the boundary of the kingdom, one must engage in a recursive dissection of the illusion of influence. Why do we feel compelled to govern the lives of others? The why is rooted in the projection of security. We believe that if we can make our external environment, including the people within it, conform to our ideals, then we will be safe. If our partner is happy, we are happy. If our friend is successful, we are successful. It is a subtle, insidious form of dependency. The how of this trap is the abandonment of one's own center. Every moment spent obsessing over another's choices is a moment where your own wheel is left untended. You have traded your sovereignty for the illusion of control. Recursive inquiry forces us to ask, can one truly exist as a master if one is constantly trying to be a jailer? The answer is a resounding no. The moment you attempt to choose for another, you lose your own frequency. You move from the state of creator to the state of manipulator. The how of liberation lies in the shift from control to recognition. You must recognize that every soul is a sovereign entity with its own divine mandate. When you look at a friend, you are looking at a master who has simply forgotten how to drive. If you try to grab their wheel, you do not help them. You merely add a second passenger who is also confused. The sovereign master, however, does something far more potent. They hold their own vision of the other's divinity. This is the secret of divine reflection. When you refuse to see the lack in another, when you choose to see them as whole, capable, and guided, you are not trying to change them. You are offering them a mirror of their own potential. You are creating a space of such high frequency that they find it difficult to remain in their own shadow. You are not the dictator of their kingdom. You are the lighthouse that illuminates their own path. By tending to your own light, you provide the only influence that actually matters, the inspiration of a life well lived. There were once two neighboring orchards in a valley divided by a river. The first gardener, a man named Hector, believed that his trees were stunted because his neighbors were lazy. He spent his days shouting across the river, telling them how to prune, when to water, and what fertilizers to use. He worked himself into a fever of frustration, his own orchard suffering as he neglected his own soil to analyze the weeds in his neighbor's field. His trees remained bitter and small, for his focus was always on the wrongness of the other side. The second gardener, a woman named Lyra, lived on the other side of the river. Her orchard was a paradise of bounty. Her trees were so laden with fruit that the branches bowed toward the earth. Hector, watching from across the river, grew resentful. How does she do it? He wondered. Her neighbors are just as lazy as mine. One day, he crossed the river to demand her secret. He found Lyra sitting under a cherry tree, simply enjoying the warmth of the sun. Lyra, he demanded, how do you manage your neighbors? I see them neglecting their trees, and it ruins the harmony of the valley. How do you force them to be better? Lyra looked at him with gentle, clear eyes. Hector, I do not manage my neighbors. I do not even look at their trees. I have enough work to do in my own orchard. I have spent years perfecting the soil, choosing the best seeds, and pruning my own branches. I have created a frequency of growth here. She pointed to the river. Have you noticed the wind? It blows from my garden toward yours. The pollen from my healthy trees has been drifting across the valley for years. I am not trying to change their trees. I am simply being the garden that I was born to be. If they choose to grow, they have the example. If they choose to remain in the dust, that is their harvest. I am responsible for the blooming of my own kingdom. The rest is the symphony of the valley. Hector returned to his side. ashamed. He stopped shouting. He started digging into his own soil. He stopped trying to dictate the orchard of others, and instead became the best gardener he could possibly be. And within a single season, the bitterness left his trees, and the valley began to shift. He had learned the ultimate lesson. You cannot force the fruit to grow, but you can be the ground in which the divine design finds a home. To embody this truth today, you must master the art of detached observation. The next time you find yourself wanting to fix a loved one, to offer unasked for advice, to fret over their career, or to worry about their choices, stop. Physically place your hand on your own heart. Remind yourself, this is their kingdom, and they are the sovereign of it. My only mandate is to keep my own garden in bloom. Release the burden of their journey. In the space where your worry once lived, place a thought of their inherent divinity. Speak to their higher self silently. I see your wisdom. I see your capacity. I trust your path. This is not passive. It is a profound act of spiritual respect. When you stop pulling at their wheel, you clear the space for them to find their own hands on it. If you are finding that this boundary has brought a new, profound peace to your relationships, and if you are ready to stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, then hit that like button. Let this be your acknowledgement that you are reclaiming the borders of your own life. But now that you have secured the boundaries of your kingdom, you are ready to enter the final, most sacred phase of the journey. You have reclaimed your identity, your supply, and your agency. You have learned the language of the word, the discipline of commitment, the movement of action, and the depth of presence. You are now prepared for the final secret, the ritual of the sovereign. We will move beyond theory and into the daily choreography of a master. We are about to look at the first hour of the day, the moment that creates the entire canvas of your life. The morning ritual is the final piece of the puzzle. Are you ready to command your day from the moment you open your eyes? We rise together in the next chapter. The world is yet submerged in the indigo silence of pre-dawn. Across the globe, millions of souls are beginning their daily ascent, but they do so in a state of fractured surrender. As the first hint of gray light touches the horizon, they reach for their devices, allowing the chaos of the world, the urgent emails, the headlines of turmoil, the demands of the collective to flood their minds before they have even opened their eyes. They are like a conductor who allows the audience to tune their instruments, deciding the tempo and the key, before they have even stepped onto the podium. The paradox is profound. The first 60 minutes of the day contain more creative power than the remaining 14 hours combined, yet it is the only time the average human intentionally abdicates their command. They drift from the dream state into a state of reactive sleep, where the inertia of yesterday dictates the momentum of tomorrow. They are not starting a new day. They are merely recycling the residue of the old. But consider the master. The master wakes to a silence that they have curated. They do not allow the world to define their identity. They impose their identity upon the world. The first hour is not a preparation for the day. It is the genesis point of the reality that is to follow. To master the morning is to master the architecture of time itself. To understand the mechanics of the sovereign ritual, one must interrogate the nature of the mind during the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Why is this specific window of time the crucible of manifestation? The why is found in the plasticity of the subconscious mind. As one emerges from the REM state, the barrier between the conscious and the subconscious, the critical faculty, is at its most porous. The mind is a blank slate, a tabula rasa that is desperate for instruction. If you fill this space with anxiety, your mind treats it as the instructional code for the day. If you fill it with divine intention, it adopts that code as the governing law of your reality. The how of the ritual requires a recursive structure: identity, abundance, and agency. 1. Identity. Why do we need this? Because the ego thrives on the stories of the past. By restating I am, you overwrite the ego's history with the soul's current truth. 2. Abundance. Why do we need this? Because the world is designed to trigger our scarcity instincts. By restating I have, you align your frequency with the infinite, ensuring that you approach your day from a position of surplus, not deficiency. 3. Agency. Why do we need this? Because intention, without specific direction, is mere daydreaming. By declaring I choose, you turn the wheel, directing the energy you have gathered into the specific channels of your highest expression. This is not a mystical practice. It is a profound psychological alignment. It is the practice of pre-loading the operating system. If you provide your brain with a clear, positive narrative before the world provides a negative one, your brain will spend the rest of the day looking for evidence to support the narrative you provided. This is the confirmation bias of the sovereign. By spending the first hour in this state, you are not merely hoping for a good day. You are mathematically increasing the probability of one by priming your perception to recognize miracles where others see only obstacles. In the archives of the Great Library of Antiquity, there exists a scroll detailing the life of a figure known only as the Chronos architect. This individual was said to have built an empire from nothing, not through conquest or inheritance, but through the deliberate, daily reconstruction of their own reality. Every morning, long before the sun kissed the peaks, the architect would enter a chamber of absolute stillness. They would not speak to a soul. They would not look at the ledgers of their business. They would sit upon a chair of simple wood, facing the east, and perform a 3-part ceremony. First, they would stand and proclaim their identity to the empty room, not as the architect, but as an expression of the divine. I am the light. I am the creator. I am the manifestation of the infinite. They did this until their pulse slowed to match the rhythm of their conviction. Second, they would visualize their storehouses, their ships, and their influence, declaring, I have all that is required. The supply is eternal. They did not visualize these things to gain them. They visualized them to reclaim them as their natural inheritance. Third, they would take a small, heavy iron key, hold it to their heart, and name one thing they would choose to accomplish that day. Today, I choose to build with mercy. I choose to act with courage. I choose to see the way out. When the architect finally emerged into the bustle of the city, they were unshakable. When messengers came with news of fire, debt, or treason, the architect did not react. They had already lived the day in the chamber of their own soul. They had already set the frequency. They had already commanded the outcome. While their competitors were scrambling to react to the chaos of the market, the architect was simply unfolding a script they had written at dawn. They were not lucky. They were synchronized. They had mastered the art of living the day before it arrived, and in doing so, they had made the material world the shadow of their morning silence. To embody this truth today, you must reclaim your morning. Starting tomorrow, set your alarm 15 minutes earlier. That time is not for the world, it is for you. When you wake, do not touch your phone. Keep your eyes closed for the first few minutes. Feel your presence in your body. Declare your identity. Speak it aloud. Who are you? I am a beacon of clarity. I am the authority of my own life. Declare your abundance. Acknowledge your wealth in all its forms. I have the wisdom I need. I have the resources of the universe at my back. Declare your agency. Set your command. Today, I choose peace. Today, I choose to move with ease. Do this for 21 days. The shifts will begin in the periphery of your life, small at first, then cascading. You will find that the day stops fighting you and starts serving you. You will become the architect. If you are ready to stop being the passenger of your mornings and start being the sovereign of your days, comment below. I am the architect of my own dawn. Let the digital ledger of this community record your commitment. But now, as we reach the end of this trilogy, we have walked the path from the passenger's seat to the summit of command. We have rebuilt your identity, your capacity to receive, and your ability to steer. Yet, there is a final, crowning truth, a perspective shift that will ensure you never truly lose your way again. We have touched on the tools, but now we must touch the source. In our final chapter, we will synthesize everything into a single, unbreakable philosophy of the divine design. We are about to look back at the entire journey and understand why every delay, every ditch, and every struggle was not a mistake, but a precise step on the map to your own greatness. The finale approaches. Prepare yourself, for you are about to walk out of this series, not as the same person who began it, but as the sovereign you were always destined to become. I will see you in the completion. Imagine standing upon the crest of the highest mountain range in existence. Beneath you lies the entirety of the terrain you have traversed, the valleys of hesitation, the treacherous ravines of resentment, the winding, fog-drenched roads of the past, and the golden, sun-drenched plains of your newfound authority. From this vantage point, a singular, breathtaking paradox reveals itself, and the path you traveled, the one you once condemned as a series of random misfortunes and tragic detours, was never a random sequence of events. It was a perfectly calibrated, handcrafted topography designed specifically for your awakening. The wind at this altitude is thin and sharp, carrying with it the clarity of the infinite. Below, the clouds part to reveal the intricate architecture of your journey. You see the moments you once called failure and recognize them as the necessary friction that sharpened your resolve. You see the losses and understand them as the shedding of weight that would have prevented this very ascent. The road was not happening to you. The road was happening for you, shaped by the unseen hand of your own higher nature. To stand here is to realize that the destination was never a place in the future, but the revelation of the traveler's own divinity. The horizon does not end at the edge of the sky. It expands into the eternal, and for the first time, you realize that the horizon is not something you are walking toward, it is the realm you now inhabit. To reach this summit is to achieve the ultimate synthesis of the sovereign life. We must now interrogate the final, most profound question. Why does the universe require this arduous journey of reclamation? The why is found in the alchemy of the soul. A soul that has never known the burden of the passenger cannot fully appreciate the majesty of the driver. A spirit that has never navigated the storm cannot fully embody the authority of the calm. The divine design is not a life without challenges. It is a life of perfect self-expression, where every challenge serves as a deliberate chisel, carving away the illusion of the small self to reveal the diamond of the true self. The how of this philosophy is found in the recursive loop of gratitude and purpose. We must ask, how does one reconcile the painful chapters of one's history with the realization that they were essential? The answer lies in the transmutation of memory. The sovereign does not erase the past. They rewrite its meaning. When you look back at the years spent in stagnation, you do not see a waste of time. You see the incubator of your wisdom. You see the deep, dark soil that provided the nutrients for your current blooming. This is the ultimate philosophical pivot, recognizing that the divine design is not a destination at the end of the road, but the inherent quality of the road itself. The how of maintaining this state is to realize that you are always in the perfect place. If you are in a struggle, you are in the perfect training ground. If you are in a season of harvest, you are in the perfect garden. If you are in a season of transition, you are in the perfect gateway. You are never off path, for you are the path. The universe is not waiting for you to become worthy. It is waiting for you to recognize that you have always been the architect of your own unfolding. This is the end of the search, for you have finally arrived at the only place there ever was, the infinite presence of your own sovereign will. In a kingdom of light, there lived an old weaver who was said to be the only person capable of seeing the great pattern of human existence. The people of the kingdom would bring her the fragments of their lives, the bitter grief of a lost love, the shame of a failed career, the anger of an unjust betrayal, and beg her to explain why these things had been allowed to happen. The weaver would take these dark, jagged threads and begin to weave them into a massive, shimmering tapestry. The people would watch in horror as she pulled the black threads of their suffering across the golden loom. "Why do you add such darkness?" they would cry. "My life was a tragedy, not a work of art." The weaver would not speak. She would only work, her fingers moving with a rhythm that seemed older than time. She would weave the black threads of injustice through the gold of resilience, the gray of solitude, through the silver of self-discovery. She worked until the sun set and the moon rose, until the tapestry was complete. Only when she stepped back did the people fall silent. They looked at the tapestry and gasped. They saw their own lives, but not as a mess of broken pieces. They saw that the black thread of their pain was the very thing that provided the contrast for the golden joy to shine. They saw that the gray thread of their loneliness was the foundation upon which their strength was built. The pattern was not a story of random events. It was a masterpiece of perfect, divine composition. One man, who had lived a life of profound hardship, wept. "I thought my life was a series of mistakes," he whispered. The weaver smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "You were looking at the back of the tapestry, my child. From the back, it is just a tangled mess of knots and stray ends. But look now at the front. You were never lost. You were being woven." To embody this truth today, you must practice the synthesis of the journey. Dedicate this final hour of our time together to a ritual of integration. Take a journal. Look back at the last year or the last decade of your life. Do not recount the events. Recount the strengths you gained from the hardest moments. Write down the gold that came from the black. Ask yourself, how did this particular storm prepare me for the authority I now hold? By doing this, you are closing the loop of the past. You are taking your power back from your memories. You are no longer a victim of your history. You are the author of your transformation. You are moving from a life of, "Why is this happening to me?" to a life of, "I see exactly why this happened for me." The trilogy is complete, but the transformation is only beginning. We have walked a long way, from the backseat to the summit. But the road ahead, the road of money, love, health, and purposes where you will truly apply these powers to build your own paradise. If you have felt the shift, if you have reclaimed your wand, and if you are ready to walk boldly into the bright, appointed future, make your final commitment here. Type the words, "I am the sovereign of my own destiny." Let it be recorded in the ether. You now hold the foundation. You have the tools. You have the identity. You have the supply. And most importantly, you have the command. The road is yours. The wheel is in your hands. And it is a beautiful day to drive toward a miracle. I am profoundly proud of the journey you have taken, and I am honored to have been your guide through the darkness and into the dawn. The car is moving in a new direction. Keep your eyes on the horizon, keep your hands on the wheel, and never forget who you are. Until we meet in the next great chapter of your reclamation, go forth and manifest the infinite. The journey was never about arriving. It was about realizing that you have been home all along.